Today we're doing something special. We've decided to throw ratings to the wind and have poets on. Uh, yeah, and when we do this, this is what Sunday is this, Cliff? Third Sunday. Third Sunday is when we've been trying moderate success to set it up so Cliff brings on interesting people. Now, Cliff's name is not Winning, even though if you read his writing, you can only think of winning. The But Winnig, and my apologies for misspelling it.
That's
I can
okay.
still remember
I got it right here.
at RadCon. I was putting together the program. An author told me I misspelled his name, and I asked him if he was sure. It seemed perfectly logical to me. So anyway, Cliff, I am going to turn it loose to you, and I'll be back before closing credits. So go for it.
And a Facebook user. For those of you who are following on Facebook, we can see your comments are from. So if you put in parentheses your name or something like that, then we'll know. Good morning. Otherwise, we'll just look after the podcast is over. So I have with me Andrew L. Roberts, who is in the BQ with, I think, the only poem in the book. It's the anthology Alternative Holidays. Neil R. McIntosh of Scotland. They're connected. The poem in the book, and we'll learn all about that. But let's start with briefly Andrew. Say hello, Andrew.
Hello, Andrew.
Thank you. I was hoping you would do that. Yep. So Andrew is prose and poetry, and he started off with. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a writer in short fiction and long fiction in prose, and then how you stumbled. Then we'll get to the poem in Alternative Holidays. Treat Neil is going to read part of. So, and that will bring Neil into the version. We can go into the longer version of your writing life, but take it away.
So I've been writing since about 1976. Started with prose, started writing poems here and there along the way. But then I sort of, as I told you one time, I fell into poetry like a alcoholic stumbling blindly into a liquor cabinet,
which is a poetic way of putting it.
Yeah, it's a simile. I started using poems as a way of sketching a story or a part of a novel from time to time, because it would capture the tone and a metaphor, and it would also immerse me in a character. And so I started writing a lot more poetry, and then I started just writing poetry because I found I actually enjoyed writing poetry more than prose. And
horror.
I'm happy there. And then about
I'm joking.
6 years ago, I started writing Durham and Rose, which is an American epic set in World War I and shortly after during the Spanish flu. And it's all told in poetry. It's my Homeric American story.
Yes, you could call it a novel in verse, or you could call it an epic poem, depending on how you want to market it. But it's basically an epic poem. Hello to everyone in the message. Hello, Roberta. Hello, Cheryl. Let's talk about your also narrative alternative holidays, which is properly pronounced. Neil, can you pronounce the title?
It's nerdy.
Yeah. So a few well, almost a year ago now, I published a poem called Absaroka Tears and New Myths, and Alicia Hilton saw it and then sent me a message asking if I'd be interested in submitting a poem to an anthology of poems and stories she was editing, and with a holiday theme. And I had never stumbled across BQ Press until that moment. And she said she was getting certain holidays
is BQ Press, edited by Bob Brown and Alicia Hilton.
Yeah, and so I asked, has she gotten anything for Hogmanay in Scotland? And I had to explain what Hogmanay was, and then she hadn't. So I immediately wrote a poem in about a day. It turned out over 2,000 words, which is kind of long for a poem, but I sent it to her and she liked it. And she asked for a couple of changes, and I did it. And when I wrote the first draft, I immediately shot it over to Neil in Glasgow. And actually, before I wrote it, he suggested I do it as Nerday instead of Hogmanay, and I went with his wisdom. And I wrote this poem. I sent it to him, and he noted a few changes that would be nice for little gems that brought it to life. And then he asked me if I wouldn't mind changing the sister's name to be his grandmother's, and absolutely. I mean, that was a no-brainer. That was perfect. And so at the same time, I decided to change the narrative's name to Neil because he was a part of the birthing of the poem, and they bought it, and now it's this incredibly long poem in this really nice anthology, and that's the story of writing Nerday.
Nice. Couple things.
Yes.
Andy, I'm just going to give you a heads up now. I'm going to ask you to read something from Durham and Rose, and it's specifically the passage I posted the link to the YouTube video.
Oh, you want that's the longer one? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to read Durham and Rose in a bit, not right now.
Yeah.
Before we do that, can you tell me how you came to know Neil in the first place, since he's in Scotland, San Francisco Bay Area, in California?
A mutual love of specific guitar, the EJ200 by Epiphone.
I love the show and tell, Neil.
I started a group on Facebook, and Neil joined it, and I got a message one time from Neil, and that an Englishman, who I will not use a pejorative word, was being culturally insensitive, rude, and an all-around jerk. So he sent me a message, hey, this guy's doing this, and I'm not feeling so good about it. So I went online, I sent the guy a message and deleted him from the group, and Neil and I started talking like every day after that, and sharing poetry with each other. He wrote a poem that was about his father it just brought me to tears. It's beautiful, and I wish he would send it off and get it published. But anyway, that's how I met Neil.
Conversation with my friend Andy. I wish you'd send it off and get it published conversation from time to time. Cool. All right. Since I'm just going to say it in my American accent, 2,000 word poem, which is about as long on the page as the format of poetry. We're going to present to you and anyone in perpetuity viewing this later the beginning of the poem, and it is going to be read by Neil because he has the narration. I've asked Neil to read it a little slower than he might normally read, so that's as best we can. But I think it would just be him do that, and Andy, you wanted to set up a little bit because it isn't
Yeah.
very obvious at the beginning of the poem. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this? We'll go into Neil reading. Is that okay?
Sure. So Ner Day is New Year's Day, and it follows Hogmanay, which is the New Year's Eve celebration. And at from midnight on, it's you can correct me on this one, Neil. You want a dark-haired stranger to be the first person to cross your doorstep because it's good luck, it's a blessing. And I think it's because in the old days the Vikings weren't dark-haired and they did terrible things when they arrived at your doorstep.
Yes.
So there's a young man who's 37, I believe, and he's returned home from the stars. He got drafted off to war, and he comes home from the stars, and his baby sister is now in her 90s. So it's that difference in the passage of time. I forget the time dilation. I can't remember the actual phrase. And this is him coming
Time
home.
distortion, I think.
Time distortion. And it's him. He's going to first foot, as they say, his sister's house and bring the blessing. But by the end of the poem, he actually first foots his entire village. And this is him coming. This is the introduction to his island home. It's based on the Isle of Skye. And we're going to read it up to the part where he comes to the sister's doorstep. Is that about right, Neil? Is that where we are?
Well, I'm having a bit of trouble getting the text up. I might have to turn my camera off.
That's fine. You can turn the camera off, and
so
yeah,
what
we
I'll
can
do,
hear
Andrew,
your voice.
What I'll do, Andrew, is I'll turn the camera off, try and get it lined up, and I'll have a go at it. I've tried various times to read the entire poem. It's roughly about 14 minutes long, and quite intense, quite difficult to read. And no reflection on your writing, because it's a marvelous poem. It's dark, it's intense, it's everything that Hogmanay should be. A lot of the traditions around Hogmanay are about, seeing out the year and seeing out the old year and seeing in the new year, getting rid of bad spirits and looking forward to the future and putting the past behind you. Which, I mean, the poem's just amazing. I hope I do it justice.
You do. You read it.
Okay, I'm going to go and try and find it,
read
and I'll let Andrew continue.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to read the beginning.
Okay.
Right.
Let me try and find that.
Okay, you do that. I'll talk to Andrew.
Well, Neil actually
doing that.
Neil actually recorded a portion and sent it to me, and it's like it's a wonderful thing when someone reads your work better than you and better than you imagine it, and it's he's got the perfect voice for it. So,
yeah, like audio book thing. That's a weird feeling for authors to hear someone else reading. Playwrights and script writers get that feeling. I had that. I sold as a reprint one of my stories to podcast Escape, and that meant that somebody other than podcast. And that was a very strange feeling listening to that. And she did voice actress and did things that were much nuanced than I was capable of doing. And so I was like, ooh, that was good. So I know Neil's is not here, but is he still logged in? I can't tell.
I don't see him as being logged in.
Yeah, he may have. We may have lost him for a minute. So we're going.
You want me to read the Durman Rose poem while we wait?
Yeah. So we're gonna go. We're back to Neil. Or hopefully Neil will come back to us. Bob, please keep an eye out for Neil in the virtual waiting room to make sure that he gets back in. We're going to talk about epic poems and your inspiration, and maybe your brother and your inspiration for this poem. We'll talk. So After I got to, when I first met Andy, he was mostly, and then he had a story, one of the winners in Writers of the Future, some magazine sales, and this was after I met him, actually. He did that, and then you started development, and shortly thereafter, you announced you were going to work on set in World War One, and it reads like the American, reads to me like the American Wilford Owen. So it feels like you were there. So, and
Well, no one's,
and like there aren't any more World War. When we were kids, there were still World War One vets, but there aren't anymore, and so there's no one to fact check. But it's like you were actually there. So please talk a little bit about decide to do that, or did you decide the muse grabbed you from the shirt, dragged you to the typewriter? What happened?
So actually, the first sale I ever did with my writing was a poem, and the stories came a little later in terms of publishing. I started writing Derman Rose, like I said, about 6 years ago, and it came about as a matter of two things came together. I had gone on a road trip with my older brother, who was a Vietnam War veteran, who he was going to play music at a coffee house at a friend owned in Atascadero. And I spent the whole weekend with him. I was his driver, which was pretty cool. And we talked a lot about...
Oh, this was Joe?
Yeah, and we talked a lot about post-traumatic stress and group therapies and stuff. And then, like, we got home, and then the next weekend I was going with a friend to a writers thing in San Francisco, and we were writing Bart, and we were talking about different things in life, and they were considering joining the army, and I kind of like tried to dissuade them from that, and then they talked about, well, maybe going in to do therapy with returning veterans, and I thought, yeah, you'd make a great Valkyrie. And while we were writing Bart Olson, I had this great idea about, Valhalla as a group therapy session for soldiers. And I mean, the whole book just kind of popped into my head. That was much longer than the final poem. I cut out some side plots, but I started writing it in, the sketch of it in verse. And then I thought, well, why not write the entire book in verse? And that's what happened. So
you were doing that thing in verse. You were doing that thing you were talking about earlier, verse, and then
the sketch.
Yeah, and you decided that to heck with sales and write an epic poem.
Yeah, well, I have other things I was writing at the same time, but I was writing it more for myself, and there's a lot of things about. So I had my grandfather's brother, when he was a boy of 13 or 14, he ran away from home, joined the Michigan 7th Cavalry. This was a long time ago. My grandfather's brother, and then the family tracked him down and had to buy out his enlistment. And then when he was old enough to join again, he joined back up. So there's a little bit of that in it. And there's my father, his service in World War II, and then my brother Joe, of course, and then there's just Derman himself, who kind of came to life as I worked on his story.
We have a question from Ellen in the chat about pronouncing Valkyrie. I always pronounce it Val. In German, it's Valkyrie. That's my best. Oh,
yeah.
You with an umlaut.
Derman Rose is an American book.
What?
Derman Rose is an American book with an American narrator.
Yes. So it's not like Kyrie eleison, right? It's different. And
but there's a nice kind of connection.
There is a nice kind of connection. Yeah. Never be afraid to ask how something's pronounced, because if you have a badge of honor. So,
And my mom used to pronounce enchiladas enchiladas, and it kind of wore off on me. So
Yeah, that's okay. So, Neil, if you are in the waiting room and waiting for Bob, stay there until Bob was able to let you back in, because he's the only one who can. We do want you
Can
to
you hear me?
I hear him.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. Yes, okay. Right.
All right.
Sorry,
so
a bit
we're
of a
now
technical
going
issue
to
there.
wrench the audience. Wanting to wrench the audience back from Durham and Rose, and we're going to go back to Alternative Holidays poem Nair Day, the opening read by Neil. Okay, Neil.
Okay. Okay, guys. This is Nair Day. Okay. So, it is a narrow village of narrow houses and narrow.
Your audio cut out. Can you try to? We cannot hear. Apologies to the audience. We are experiencing on our intercontinental line from Scotland. Hello, Bob.
Scotland's a continent?
Well, it's an island. It's on the continental shelf. I'm pretty sure.
Well, I see that we've got him fully live. So what I'm going to do is what every computer genius does. I'm going to turn him off and turn him back on.
Okay.
Didn't change.
Are you there, Neil? Okay, you can hear me, Neil. I'm going to ask you to log off, and then Bob can log you back in.
I can do that.
Okay. Why don't you boot him? Give him the boot, and then.
I've got him logged off. Now he has to. Let me see if I can totally eject him. Well, I can, but I don't know if he'll be able to get back in when I remove this. Well, look at the bright side. You're talking poetry. We all grew up loving poetry, right? Who can forget roses are red, violets are blue? There we go.
All right. Hello. Welcome back.
Yes. Okay.
Begin again, because you cut out like in the first sentence.
I'll start again. Okay. So here goes take 2. Nair Day.
Yes. Your audio is a little bit dodgy right now, Neil. So if bars, or if there's a place you can move physically where your connection is stronger. Now we can hear you a lot better.
Let's try. I'm in the other end of the house.
All right, go for it.
Make it sound like a grand hop. Right. Getting the page. So Nair Day by Andrew Roberts. It is a narrow village of narrow houses and narrow lane. A town of.
Oh no. Welcome to 21st century technology. He was doing so good too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The narrow village of narrow houses and narrow Scottish. Okay. Well, we're gonna of the poem Nair Day. It's not as far into it as we intended to read. Oh, right. He was. Oh, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Yeah. We will try again. Back to Durham and Rose, and we, like as Bob said, when I was like 4 years old, I wrote my first poem, and I will. This is the world premiere. Are you ready for my 4 year? Andy, I think I've read this to you, and it is see a poem as lovely as an Alaskasaurus. So, as a pre-kindergartner, I was playing with meter and rhyme, and so. But from the read, why don't you read that one poem about that you had posted on Facebook yesterday, and then we will hope to get Neil back. If we do not, then I'm going to have to read the opening to the poem. But he was just so beautiful the way he reads it.
Okay, so this is Something of Home from Durham and Rose. I turned the pages with my thumb, turned them slowly one by one, sitting beside his still warm corpse, waiting for my companions. With the morning sun just beginning to show, more yellow than gray, a pale glow, pale upon my upturned wrists, pale upon the open book, pale within the dead boy's soft green eyes. I had opened his book straight to its middle, to where he had marked either his last place or his favorite passage, marked it with a pressed flower. A tea rose, I think, inserted there with love and care. I gazed down at those crisp white pages, so impossibly clean and white, still smelling of new ink and new glue, gold leafed upon the edges, all neatly bound and new. Growing brighter still as the soiled sun edged its way out from the dawn and into that reluctant day. The book was small between my hands, almost girlish, delicate and dear, and though the words were all in German, I did my best to read them out loud, and read them true, and read them clear. Read them for the dead boy who I had killed in that same hour, and though he could no longer hear, it seemed the right thing to do, but I admit, I won't deny, I read them for myself as well, for the simple selfish pleasure of feeling those foreign words turning new and unexpected upon my tongue, to whisper into my own ear, and when I had finished, I flipped the pages back upon themselves, back towards the front, and I found the photograph of him tucked inside the fold secure. A picture of this dead boy when he was yet alive, about my own age, wearing what must have been his Sunday suit, standing with a dark-haired girl, a sister or a sweetheart, tucked in close beside him, smiling, underneath an archway of white roses, holding the very book in his hand that I now held between my own. A gift, it seemed to me, even then, something of his home, something of his life before he'd hurried off to join our war. Something of his that was now something of mine, a gentle thing that had no business being in this most ungentle place, something that should have stayed at home with his sister or his sweetheart, something treasured, loved, kept safe, instead of coming unto me and into my blood-stained hands, a trophy and memento mori, taken from one dead boy by another, a hellish sort of prize, recognized for what it was, but accepted nonetheless, carried away and tucked with care, close inside my coat, back to my own trench, back to my own muddy hole, and everywhere I would go thereafter.
That is beautiful and brutal. Such a good poem to read in Microcosm of Durham and Rose, which is also beautiful and brutal. For those interested, there is some mythology, because it's an epic poem. There's content to it. There is, a but
to be a true epic, it has to have some supernatural agency involved and cross long journey.
But mostly it's realistic. Certainly, it would be shelved, I think, with any poetry or not in the genre section, because that isn't the main focus of the piece.
I think the trickiest thing about writing it is Durman is in denial through much of it, and he's telling his story in Sensramir to all the other dead soldiers, and he's telling it all out of order, because every time he gets close to the central truth, he deflects into a different story until he comes down to the end where he can't deny it anymore, and he comes to a resolution. So,
which is a beautiful structure and Homeric structure, but a nonetheless a very for the material. So yeah, and why don't you hold the cover of that book again so people can see? It's called Durham and Rose at on Finer. I think it's at BarnesandNoble.com and all those other places.
Yeah.
Yeah. Notes that's kind of how therapy works too. Yes.
Yeah.
that is it of dealing with trauma, right? This is a book about and it's surprisingly out on the eve of COVID, and now we also have the Russian and Ukrainian war. I think it resonates strongly with our current age, with the 2020s. Ellen makes a wonderful point here in the comments. It is a very human trait, traded truths. We never know if it will heal us or kill us. Yeah. So let's if Neil is saying he'll like add a recording to the afterward. Is that what I'm gathering? Neil, did you want to have one more try, or do you? We're doing that for the participants here. I think he's going to want to add it later. So, yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to read the opening.
You want me to? Okay.
Which isn't as Scottish as Neil's, but and we were on poetry as well. But
I'll do my best not to go into a bad accent.
Yeah.
I don't want to say.
So let's Neil. Is he going to rescue you? Can you hear us?
Neil, can you hear us? No, he can't.
Okay. All right.
I'll read the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. So Andy is going to read the beginning, and of you who are interested in Neil's reading, which includes me, and I think watching this podcast at this time, he has promised to make a recording and attach it as a comment to the video, I guess, on Facebook. So we'll hear the author read.
I'm asking him.
Take it away.
A message. If he does post it, see if he can He can do the entire poem. Okay. Narrow Day. It is a narrow village of narrow houses and narrow lanes, a town of narrow thoughts and frugal hopes diminishing, hugging close the leathered cliff, its crooked backbone that separates this old place from the rest of the world that has long since pressed forward and moved on, seeking out a broader sky in which to dream much wider dreams. And yet this is home, stubborn and defiant, back against that wall, forever facing outward toward its storm-blackened sea, just as mourners must face the open grave stoically, with grief denied and bent inward, for none to witness or betray. Lichen-mottled stone walls lift seaweed-thatched rooftops, chimneys yet steam with the last fires of Hogmanay, but all the windows are closed and shuttered fast, hands clapped over the eyes, protecting those ancient and irreplaceable panes of glass that the ancestors brought to this island when they first came from the mainland far away. A cock crows soon another as morning breaks, announcing the first hour of daylight. Though with daylight also denied on the stormy New Year's Day, the wind and rain have rendered everything the same shade of wearied gray that drowns the soul and quenches any remaining thirst to dream. And yet those dreamers still awake who stumble home from their last merriments of the now dead year stagger with heads hanging loosely from their shoulders, elbows, knees, and hips near unhinged, the joints being too well lubricated by too much whiskey and dancing. Some weep for nostalgia, some laugh for the same, and some so sick with their joy and their regrets that it is only by a miracle that they'll find their direction home this day. Three such men walk together, shoulder to shoulder, would-be boxers swaying and weaving and still singing. They nearly collide with the young dark-haired stranger coming down from the port beyond the hill. Seeing him in the last moment only, they splinter, come apart, and roll. Then when once he's passed, come back together and reassemble, arms again interlacing over each other's shoulders, becoming a gate of three pickets with one shared cross member. A crooked gate set free, windblown, rogue, and tumbling down the road. One man swears, another quotes Burns, and the third vomits all over his companions. They curse together until they laugh together and carry on. But the stranger strides onward, head down against the wind with his singular purpose undeterred, until he reaches his destination and knocks 3 times upon the oak of Sissy Mackenzie's door. He gazes up at the house before him, struck by what has changed, and struck deeper still by what has remained unchanged, left bewildered by the truth. 18 years have passed for him, while 87 have passed for her. And though he's long known this brutal equation, seeing the thing up close is different than knowing it as numbers upon paper. And of course, there is no going backwards. That's the beginning.
That is
But
a stunning, also beautiful and brutal. And I think of a more worthy of the moniker, the cold equations, than the original. These are actual Einsteinian equations about traveling near creates a time distortion with respect to those who are not traveling relative. So his it's not a paradox, but it is the kid sister is now older than the much older than the older. So, and it's also what strikes me about both Durham and Rose, this poem, Nerday. It's there are survivors of war, people who lived through war, but who didn't really live. It took the character Neil's life, took their relationship, and it took he's now in his 30s, start a family. It's a little later than he might have started a family, right? And he'd have, and it's be that person, right? Because war changes, and it changes. Spoiler alert! It changes the war. The war affects him after the war in a big way. A life he might have had, of a normal civilian life, not an option for him, as it isn't for so many veterans of war. So, do you want to talk a little bit? I'm interested actually in how Joe, who is a Vietnam vet and who also writes poetry that is excellent, and I wonder how he has reacted to both Durham and Rose and to Nerday.
I don't know if he's read Nerday. We've talked very little about Durham and Rose because the one thing I said to him when I know he has it, as I said, I'm worried that he'd read the entire book because there's some pretty hardcore, brutal stuff, and I don't want it to open wounds for my brother. He's already had enough time tending them. It's a hard thing. I read one piece to a man that I know through work, and he cried when I was reading it, and I did not know that he had lost his son in Afghanistan. And it was like getting just when I found out, it was like took the wind right out of me, and you realize even our best words are dangerous things.
It is not a safe, and all the really good books are not safe books. should be safe, and poetry is certainly not safe, right? I mean, poetry is like the early each other stuff, right? You know, the were read out loud around the campfire or whatever, and we saw it has a verbiage that gets into the soul, I think. You know, very
so Duerman runs away from home at 14 to go to war because his older brother has already gone to war, and he idolizes his older brother, and there's a certain natural thing there for me to relate to. The brother Joe, Duerman's brother Joe, is not my brother Joe, though. My brother Joe is just an amazing ultimate big brother, and it's funny because later on in the book, Duerman is older, wiser, and his childhood sweetheart has a son who wants to go to fight in World War II, but he's underage, and he wants Duerman to help convince his parents to let him go. And Duerman, that's the last thing Duerman wants to do. And you want me to let me read the poem that he when he tries to convince the boy not to go.
I won't stop you.
It's called War. So the boy asks Duerman to either convince his mother and father to let him join, before he's of age, or to help him forge the papers. And Duerman, this is called War. Pulling that boy in close, showing him my teeth, and smelling his sudden fear, I said, war is industry, not heroism. Piecework at best, and nothing more than the demoralization and demolition of right and wrong, and everything and all the rules we learned in church and learned in school from our teachers and from our moms. Smeared and crudely erased until we have been rendered blank slates upon which cunning men might scribble out their work orders. No man's land is no place of honor. It's a factory floor, the charnel house where we kill and nothing more. Kill all the goodness in ourselves because the industry of war cannot thrive where goodness remains even if only half alive. So here's the truth, boy, that I learned too late. Though maybe it's not too late for you. That the worst of war is not what we do to the enemy, not the killing, not the wounding, the gassing and the maiming, but what we do to ourselves when we turn our children into soldiers, rob them of their last breath of innocence, and leave them the half-made, ill-made, incomplete simulacrums of men. For that is what is made with war. Dead men who are dead boys, and nothing more. That's
bravo.
Can I interject?
Sure.
Wow.
Please do. The whole book is like that, man.
The ghost in the machine just spoke.
Yep. And read, people, and a worthy read, like anything worthy is intense, and this is intense. So we're going to move away, cheery and happy though that topic is for a Sunday morning, and you have a new collection on the horizon.
Yeah.
About that.
Feathers, Wax, and Dreams. It's more poems I've been writing over the years. You've probably seen 99% of them. I share them with you. There are a few that are again sketches I made for stories, and some of them are pandemic or lockdown related. Couple political ones. And just some kind of personal ones that are there. The thing I like about poetry, writing poetry more than prose, is even when I'm telling lies, which are, stories, I'm able to immerse myself in their truths. And
Talk about that. Tell me
well,
about that paradox.
well, I learned that by doing Durham and Rose, because by the end of it, I wasn't sure if I was writing Durham and Rose or if Durham and Rose was writing me. Because 5 years in, and when I finished the book, I wanted to get away from Durham because he kept talking too much. And
He is.
but it was good to kind of step aside from him and write some more happy poems. But when you're telling a story in a poem, there's one big freedom that I love, and that's metaphor. You can throw something on the page, like the idea of the three friends in Near Day, when you describe them as both drunks, boxers, and a fence. And they're kind of the idea of the gate that Durham has to pass through, or not Durham, but Neil has to pass through to get home, right? And you can throw that metaphor down without saying like. It is a gate.
Right.
It is the fence. And there's something more true about a metaphor than a simile.
Yeah.
And that's why I love writing poetry, because you can glom onto the truth in literal and figurative terms. I learned that from Bob Dylan. That's also a gift from my older brother Joe when I was, 6 or 7 years old, having Bob Dylan playing in the bedroom. So
yeah. I mean, it does sound like others were a gift in general. Excuse me. So
Neil,
in a little bit, I'm going to ask you a poem about the boy in the swing.
Oh, you want me to read that?
We're not going to identify which brother the son is, but you can include everything.
Okay, I'm going to have to open the file.
If Neil, do you have audio at all?
Can't hear you, Neil.
I can't hear anything. I was hoping Neil would read us one of his own poems.
Yeah, me too.
We're gonna have to. Well, it looks like he's gonna try and get audio, but if we're unable to get audio, maybe we'll have Neil on a future podcast where he could do that for us with a better. Neil, can you speak? Speak, man. Nope, don't hear you. Can't hear you. Nothing. Sometimes Bob says sometimes it helps to try turning off the camera.
Yeah, what happens?
All right, try speaking.
A lot of bandwidth.
Okay. Neil, can you speak? We're not hearing anything. We're not hearing anything on our end.
No.
Okay. Oh, wait. No, that wasn't. Okay. I'm sorry, Neil. We cannot hear you. We can.
Would you want me to read the best of summer? Cliff?
Neil? Andy?
Yeah, did you want me to read the best of summer?
Oh, I did. Yeah, you're asking me to read the best of summer. Neil, sorry that we're having audio problems with you. I hope to, but in the meantime, you can just sit there and look pretty, and we're okay. So this is going to be in the new book, Andy.
Yes.
This poem. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and it's based on a photograph of a boy.
Yes.
Take it away.
The best of summer. What is the best of summer? It must be this: to be a child, barefoot and in blue jeans, with both soles driving upward towards the sky. Ashton, my brother's son today, swings solo upon the blue saddle of his blue swing, swinging higher and higher, his smile brighter even than his bright orange sweatshirt in the sun towards which he climbs, leaving his shadow to chase back and forth upon the sweet summer lawn below.
I think that's a good place to end our readings for today, because it's about the brightness in the future and the next generation. So we today through war and through time distortion, we've ended up with a bright summer's day. I think that's a place to end that. Andy, can you hold up the cover for Alternative Holidays so that interested in purchasing that's some wonderful stories. And there was a previous, people can go back to a recording of a BQ Press podcast about that. This is Andrew's to the book that you heard part of. And hopefully Neil will resolve technically of the poem, and then people can listen to it in the comments section. And that's Kite
Shadows and Smaller Secrets.
Yeah. Yes. And then you also have a number of prose works in various books, including New Myths, issues of New Myths magazine. What?
And Bourbon Pen in a couple of issues.
And Bourbon Pen, yes, another excellent publication. I am going to thank both of our guests, Andrew, and thank Bob for hosting and giving us the opportunity to be here. The audience who have put some excellent comments and questions of today's podcast. Bob, do you want to have the final word?
Oh, I was going to say, Neil, could you try and say something now? Nope. Okay. I found a red button that said something might be wrong, and I pushed it and it went away, but it didn't change things. Well, guys, Andrew, what was that poem you read about the commercialization of war?
War.
Rare?
War.
It was one of the poems in Durham and Rose, Bob.
Yeah.
I want to chew your butt.
Why is that?
We had a book called Alternative War.
I know. I discovered that after.
Let me
I had war.
That poem would have opened the book. It is so good and great. And if we ever do a sequel, a second round, put it in there, because I will tell you, I had never heard of you before we did Alternative Holidays. And I consider you one of the great discoveries of that book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You are awesome. And as a note, those of you who liked Alternative Holidays, we also did Holiday Leftovers, where we took all of the stories that were that we had passed on for Alternative Holidays and put them in a book. Now, I don't mean to be harsh, but it outsold Alternative Holidays.
Well, everybody likes leftovers until that's day 50 of turkey.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, well, what it was, and I'll be honest here, our audience is quirky, humor, fun, or serious, deep thought. And horror that we published in Alternative Holidays was excellent horror. It was really good horror, to which the average BQ reader says, but where do I laugh? And
Vomiting
so that was
on each other.
yeah, that was a valuable lessons learned. But I will remind you guys that we have my favorite book of poetry that B Cube Press has published is called Poetry for the Thoughtful Child. It is poems written for children, and I forget we got I think close to 15 different countries represented because they're all over the world. In the there's a set stories for the thoughtful child and poems or poetry for the thoughtful child. And if you like reading internationally developed works, so you're not just getting the Anglo perspective, try it. It's got some very good stuff. We have one fellow turned a tribal legend into a great story that I loved. But the thing that I need to tell you now is we have one open call out, and it's for a book called Scott's Planet. Think back to the American West. What would have happened if the railroads left? The towns would dry up, etc. Well, we set this world where we discover faster than light drive, and we get out into the asteroid belts with all of our high tech, and we start building colonization ships like mad. And we colonize hundreds of worlds on the premise that there is something on those worlds that we're going to be able to make money off of. Well, guess what happens about 10 years into the worlds being populated? They find out there's a whole lot of worlds that ain't making no money. And so they give those guys a shot. They say, I tell you what, we're going to offer you to clear you off of the world and take you home. Or you can stay with what you got. This is the story of a world where they stayed. We've all read the great science fiction epics where they discover lost human colonies. And my question had been, where did they come from? How'd they get there? Well, this is a story of how they got there. And so you got about 1,300 people stuck on a world called Scott's Planet, where the most advanced life form is a small lizard that is eaten by the chickens. And it's fun. And there's room in this book. We accept poetry.
Okay.
Now, the guys that are, BQ Press, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but we always take poetry. And that's why we have books of poetry out, is because I like poetry. I like poets. I mean, I can still, just from the joy of Robert Frost stopping in the woods on a snowy evening, which may be corny in today's age, but for me, it was just really profound, and I liked it. I also liked Horatio at the Bridge, too, because it was in the books in my grandmother's basement. So I will encourage both of you, because, Neil, we have one author from Scotland who shows up quite a bit, and we love him. And I'm going to sit here with a blank look on my face because suddenly I can't remember his name. Love is fleeting. But yeah. So I will encourage you and our listeners to publish. We opened it up, and then I had a minor embolism problem that sidelined me for almost for a long time. And but we've gotten back into the reading. We've fully developed the Bible for it. The Bible you'll find out on the this is where my humor kicks in. Scott's Planet Information or Information Group or Team. I love acronyms. So let the spigot open and the creative stories flow. But Scott's Planet, Infamy.
Yeah.
Um,
You're
But-
all wet.
yeah, I know. I someday I'm going to go to hell for that because thank God I fought David Gerald and Stan Kaczynski. There is no shortage of bad puns from those two people.
From them
And
either.
and so I'm reposting them. And for those of you who want to hear this video, it goes live on the BCube Press YouTube channel, and it's already up there. And I am just
um,
there-
while there's a couple last comments, Ellen asked if we could make poetry a regular follow-up, and then we'll see from there. Bob, if you're considering doing another book of poetry for children in the future.
Well, I think by all means, because Jane Yolen, you know, she's a great writer, but she's an incredible poet. We've had her on to talk about her poetry. When we did the poetry for children, we brought those guys on, and I can share with you my contact information for the poets. And I don't want to make it regular like every week, but I want to. I certainly, the talent of poetry is that it can make you think in ways you hadn't thought before, and do it in 24 lines, as opposed to the having to read a whole 4,400 word thing or a whole book to get to that point where you say, wow. I don't know how many lines that piece you read was, Andrew, but it was just, it says everything I've ever thought about war. That, you know, we're not aiding the Ukraine so much as we love democracy, but that's a factor. But somebody's making all those guns we're sending over.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's
very profitable.
Yeah, everything's reality. And I do wish the Ukrainian people well, because had we not acted, I do believe the world would be a much poorer place with one less group of independent people living on it. So, that said, thank you, Cliff Winnig. Thank you, Andrew Roberts. And, oh, that's my way of talking to Neil, because he, yeah.
When you're talking to Neil.
Okay, thank you, Neil McIntosh. You guys were all wonderful, and I look forward. And if anybody, if you want to know where to find Scott's Planet, it's out on Moksha right now. And also, we did put up a Facebook group, and we got the BCube Press project page. You can find it all about it through there. We bought one. I tell you what, this is the most exciting group of submissions. Once you clear out the desk drawer submissions, we're running about 50-50 to stories that I say, wow, I can see this in the book. So it's exciting, and it's going to be a multi-volume set. This is Scott's Planet, the early years. Hey, you know why we're doing Scott's Planet? It's Harry
I just want to
Turtle.
know who is Scott.
No, it's Harry Turtledove's fault. It was the first story I ever sold, was called Scott's Planet. It was about a chicken farmer whose wife wanted to go, and he didn't want to go. And his best friend, who had to go because he had a back injury, and his wife, who didn't want to go, and who happened to be, there's a relationship going on. So each of their spouses left, and they stayed and raised giant chickens.
Giant chickens.
Hey, my chickens are up to about 3 to 4 feet tall. And
Nice.
they can fly well because the density of the air is it's got a better air density and higher oxygen. So we have big bugs, because you know bugs grow bigger in high oxygen because they absorb oxygen through their shells. And so
That's how we got
imagine the joke.
foot-long dragonflies. Yeah.
Oh no, our dragonfly's wings are 18 inches long. It's
Yeah,
fun.
because there was a lot of O2.
Yeah, and the millipedes, you just don't even want to mess with the millipedes. They won't eat you; they're herbivorous. But I got to figure that somewhere in there is something that tastes like lobster.
Probably.
So this is a whole world that we're building and exploring and having fun with. And if it's any help for Neil, there's 3 main populated islands, and one of them is rocky enough that I should have called it Scotland. But is Scotland really as rocky as they say? No? Okay, good. I didn't call it Scotland, but I've always heard of it as being rocky. And when I envision the planet, some of the scenes out of that movie, not Robert the Bruce, but the guy that preceded him.
Braveheart.
Huh?
Braveheart.
Wallace?
Braveheart, yeah. Some of the scenes in Braveheart, the landscape, the long rolling green hills, and were inspiring for that. Okay, so I'm going to let you go and stop talking because I can rant all day. You guys know that because one day my guest didn't show up, and I found out 5 minutes before. I ranted all day. Okay, take care, Cliff, and I'll see you in a month. And Andrew, I'll see you when I'm responding to your submission for Scott's Planet, both you and Neil. So you guys take care, and